Alright, we're here at the first Nitro of December, and let's see what the titles are looking like. So we got Christian coming off his defense against Shawn Michaels. Michelle McCool, still Divas champ. Gail and Sarah Stock unified the Divas and Women's Tag titles last month. Bryan Danielson, US champ. Mickie James, Women's champion. Gail Kim and Sarah Stock, like I said, unified the tag titles last month. Tanahashi is Cruiserweight champion. John Cena is the world champion. AJ Styles and Kurt Angle are the tag champions. Abyss defeated Kenta last month to win the television championship. Batista, Rey Mysterio, and RVD are still trios champions. And last month we saw Trish Stratus become the World War III winner. Now, let's get into Nitro, and let's get into December 2006. Alright, we're starting off Nitro with a World Television Championship Open Challenge match between Abyss, the champion, and the challenger, Jeff Hardy. Abyss defeats Jeff Hardy and retains the television championship. Next, we have a unscheduled in-ring promo from Kurt Angle along with AJ Styles, the tag champions. And Kurt is mad at losing World War III last week, where he eliminated Samoa Joe and then was bragging and feeling almighty to himself until Trish Stratus then threw him over the top rope from behind. And so Kurt Angle is pissed, says he should have won, and he's calling out the world champion, John Cena. But John Cena does not confront him, but Samoa Joe does, the person Kurt Angle eliminated. Joe steps into the ring in front of AJ and Kurt, and they're going back and forth until it eventually leads to a fight. And so AJ and Kurt are both fighting Samoa Joe. Joe is doing his best, but it's 2 against 1. And then John Cena comes down and joins the fight and fights off AJ and Kurt. And security and staff come and pull them apart until we go to commercial. Then we come back from commercial and we have a Divas tag match between Brooke Adams and Jillian Hall taking on Maurice and Michelle McCool. And it is Michelle McCool doing the nasty to Brooke Adams to get the win. Next we have an onstage interview with CM Punk discussing his feud with Christopher Daniels as well as what happened at World War III. And Punk basically says he does not hate Christopher Daniels. He is actually quite confused about what he is doing, and he has respect for him, but he knows that he's better than Christopher Daniels, and so he doesn't want to be involved with anymore, and he wants to move on to better things. And yeah, Punk says he's better than him, he respects him, but Punk is the best in the world, and he'd like to move on from Daniels. Next, we have Shelton Benjamin taking on Sugiura, and Shelton Benjamin defeats Sugiura. Next, we have a onstage interview with last week's World War III winner, Trish Stratus, and she is discussing how she will be choosing to go after Mickie James rather than Michelle McCool, and she will be choosing to go after the Women's World Championship because she aims to become a 7-time Women's World Champion, which is a record. Right now she is tied for 6 with Akira Hokuto, and she would like to go for 7. And then Mickie James, with the Women's World title, attacks Trish from behind. Next we have a tag match between Kofi Kingston and Matt Sydal taking on Booker T and the returning Scott Steiner. And Booker T and Scott Steiner defeat Kofi Kingston and Matt Sydal. Next, we have a backstage interview with the U.S. champion Bryan Danielson, who is, because last week, or a few weeks ago, it was Danielson versus Nigel for the U.S. title, and Morishima interfered and attacked them both. Then last week, we saw Nigel not very happy with that, And so Danielson now is basically saying that Nigel is an embarrassment for crying, he says. That Nigel did not cry, but, complaining. And Danielson says that Morishima is way more of a challenge than Nigel, and so Danielson is definitely willing to fight Morishima again for the U.S. title, but Nigel needs to grow up, and he's an embarrassment. Alright, now for the main event, and I forgot to mention that after we came back from commercial, when these four were all brawling in the ring, commentary announced that Commissioner Stephanie made this tonight's main event. So we have AJ Styles and Kurt Angle, the tag champions, taking on Samoa Joe and the world champion John Cena in a non-title tag team match. And in this match, Joe and Cena defeat AJ and Kurt, but via disqualification when Kurt Angle got disqualified while fighting Samoa Joe. So Kurt Angle grabs a chair or the tag titles or something, gets himself disqualified on purpose. So then post-match, we have Kurt Angle attacks Samoa Joe, of course, and then John Cena started fighting Kurt Angle. AJ Styles was down at the end of the match, and then they get up and start fighting. AJ and Joe, that is, while Cena and Kurt are fighting. And we have a pull apart, which is basically what happened at the start of the show, where staff, security, referees, all that, are pulling the four apart until it is interrupted by the commissioner, Stephanie, and she lets it be known that next week we will have a number one contenders match for the world title between Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe, ex Nitro. Alright, we're here on SmackDown, and we're starting off with Shark Boy taking on Shingo, and Shingo defeats Shark Boy. Then we cut to a pre-taped backstage interview with Booker and Steiner talking about their match on Nitro. This was taped after their match backstage, and it showed them talking about how Booker talking about how he feels disrespected, and Steiner talking about how he wants to win gold again in WCW. And as they're talking about that, they are interrupted by Petey Williams, who approaches Steiner and Booker and is telling Steiner about how much of a big fan he is, and how he would like to become Steiner's protege. And so Steiner says, sure, whatever. And yeah, so we cut back to the ring, and we have Kenny Omega and Sanjay Dutt taking on Starrcade, and Kevin Steen defeats Sanjay Dutt. Then we cut backstage to tag champions Gail Kim and Sarah Stock, and they're talking about the Divas titles that they just newly won, and they are interrupted by Divas champion Michelle McCool, as well as Maurice, and Michelle McCool is very upset that Gail and Sarah Stock even mentioned her last week, or whenever that was, last month. She's also upset that they are now on her show without her permission. And, yeah, they are, Gail and Sarah Stock are not budging. Michelle McCool is being a Karen, if you will. Michelle McCool, basically also says that Michelle and Maurice deserve to be Divas tag champions rather than these two. Michelle says that they are not, they don't look good enough. Divas stuff. Then we cut back to the ring, and we have Alex Shelley taking on Chris Sabin, and Chris Sabin defeats Alex Shelley, and then post-match, they shake hands. Alright, we're here for week 2 of Nitro, and we're starting off with a onstage interview with Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle is talking about his match against Samoa Joe coming up in the main event. It is a number 1 contenders match, and the winner will face John Cena for the World Heavyweight Championship at Starrcade. And so Kurt is talking about Samoa Joe and John Cena, and then El Generico and Kevin Steen make their way through the curtain onto the ramp, or the stage, and are trying to get Kurt's attention. Kurt is basically ignoring them. He knows they're there, but he's not paying them any mind. AJ is trying to get them to leave, and Generico and Steen grab the mic and challenge AJ and Kurt for a tag title match. And Kurt accepts, takes the mic back, and goes back to cutting a promo on Joe and Cena. And so next week, Generico will get a shot at the tag titles, and tonight, Kurt Angle will take on Samoa Joe in a number one contenders match for the World Championship. Then we cut backstage, and we see cameras showing Samoa Joe laid out in the parking lot. Somebody attacked Samoa Joe as he was arriving to the arena, and that is not very good considering Joe has a number one contenders match tonight in the main event. I wonder who attacked Joe. Next, we have a tag team match between Kenta and Shibata taking on Christian Cage and a returning to WCW Rhino. And this match goes to a double countout as Shibata and Christian both get counted out. Next, we cut backstage and we see Nigel trying to get his way into Stephanie's office. And he eventually does. Stephanie is quite busy because of what happened with Samoa Joe. And so she's kind of panicking, wondering if Joe's going to be able to compete in the main event tonight. But anyway, Nigel is here for other reasons. He is here to try and get a shot at the Bryan Danielson at the end of the U.S. title. He believes he was cheated after Morishima interfered last time he got a shot. And he doesn't really care what Bryan Danielson says. And so he's asking Stephanie for a shot. Stephanie says she will think about it. Just leave her alone. She needs to focus. She will address it next week on Nitro. Now we cut back to the ring. We have Austin Aries taking on Shelton Benjamin, and Shelton Benjamin defeats Austin Aries. Next, we have an in-ring interview with the Trios champions, Batista, Rey Mysterio, and RVD. And it is interrupted by Booker T, Scott Steiner, and P. Williams. And these six are going back and forth, talking. And it leads to next week, Rey Mysterio versus Scott Steiner. Booker, Steiner, and Pete Williams obviously want the Trios titles. Next, we have a backstage interview with Samoa Joe. And Samoa Joe is holding his neck in pain, icing it, if you will. And SoCal Val is here asking him who attacked him. And Samoa Joe straight up says, you know who. It was that ball licker, AJ Styles. And so AJ Styles attacked Samoa Joe in the parking lot. And Joe now has a hurt neck. And SoCal Val is asking if Joe will compete in tonight's main event. And Samoa Joe says, of course he will. So the main event stays Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe, number one contenders match. Next, we have a tag match between Alicia Fox and Molly Holly taking on Amada and Marcella. And Amada defeats Alicia Fox. Next, we have a pre-taped promo from Christopher Daniels responding to CM Punk last week. And Daniels finds it hilarious that CM Punk thinks that he's better than him. Daniels says that he is a much better pure wrestler, pure athlete than CM Punk is. And Daniels says if Punk disagrees with him, he's going to have to prove it. Next, we have a backstage interview with the Women's World Champion, Mickie James, and JB is asking her why she attacked Trish Stratus last week, and is it because she is scared of Trish Stratus? And Mickie says, why would she be scared of Trish Stratus? She's the world champion. She doesn't need to be scared of Trish Stratus. Speaking of Trish Stratus, where's Trish Stratus? She's not here tonight. Maybe she's the one that's scared. Now, for the main event, we have Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle. And during this match, we had AJ at ringside, John Cena on commentary, and during the match, AJ tried to get involved, and Steen Jericho came in and fought AJ Styles away. And so it was just Joe versus Angle, no shenanigans. But Joe was, of course, dealing with a neck injury. And Kurt Angle defeats Samoa Joe via a top rope Olympic slam. And so at Starrcade, it will be Kurt Angle versus John Cena for the World Heavyweight title. And we end off week 2 of Nitro with John Cena standing on stage with the world title and Kurt Angle in the ring. Alright, we're here on SmackDown, and we're starting off with Mystico and Volador Jr. taking on LAX, and Mystico defeats Homicide. Then we cut to an in-ring interview with the tag champions, Gail, Kim, and Sarah Stock, and they're responding to Michelle McCool's challenge last week, and Gail and Sarah Stock are boasting about how they're doing it on Michelle McCool's show. It is not Michelle McCool's show, but she is delusional. And so Gail and Sarah accept and are Gail and Sarah Stock are rubbing it in that they're on their show again. Michelle and Maurice confront them. Gail, Kim, and Sarah Stock accept their challenge for the tag titles, and it leads to they're going back and forth, leads to a cat fight. Then we have Tetsuya Naito and Tomohiro Ishii taking on Nitro and Mercury. And Johnny Nitro defeats Naito by cheating. Then we cut backstage to Hiroshi Tanahashi being interviewed, and Tanahashi is asked what he's the Cruiserweight champion, he's asked how he feels about Shelton Benjamin, the number 1 contender for the Cruiserweight title, and Tanahashi says he likes Shelton Benjamin, and it should be a good challenge for him if Shelton wishes to challenge him for the Cruiserweight title. Then the main event is Jerry Lynn taking on Takeshi Morishima, and Morishima defeats Jerry Lynn. Alright, we're here for week 3 of Nitro, and we're starting off with a trios match between Nakajima, Shibata, and Kensuke Sasaki taking on Shawn Michaels, Rhino, and Christian Cage. Of course, last week it was Rhino and Christian Cage against Shibata and Kenta, and it went to a double countout. And now in this match, Shibata pins the NWA World Champion Christian Cage via a flash pin. And then post-match, there is a little shoving contest between Christian and Shibata, and Christy Hemme makes her way to the ring with a microphone, and Christian says to Shibata, "What the hell is your problem, man?" And Shibata responds by saying Christian is a shit champion, and therefore challenges Christian for a title match. And Christian does not respond very well to that. He's a little upset, and referees and their tag partners pulled them off. And then we cut away. Then we cut backstage to Jeremy Borash with a microphone in front of a screen, and on that screen shows a live feed of Trish Stratus in her home gym in Toronto, and Trish is being asked by JB about Mickey's comments last week, and Trish responds saying that she's of course not scared of Mickey James, and that she is only putting in extra work to prepare for the match at Starrcade. And Trish lets Mickey know that she will be at Nitro next week in Toronto. Cut back to the ring, and we have Scott Steiner taking on Trios champion Rey Mysterio. And in this match, Booker and P. Williams are ringside for Scott Steiner, and then of course Batista and RVD are ringside for Mysterio. And during this match, we have Scott Steiner defeat Rey Mysterio after interference from P. Williams. Next, we have a in-ring interview with the commissioner, Stephanie, and Stephanie makes a lot of announcements here. She firstly announces that at Starrcade, it will be Nigel McGuinness versus Takeshi Morishima versus Bryan Danielson for the United States Championship. She also announces that next week, the Divas champions Gail Kim and Sarah Stock will be defending the Divas Tag Titles against Maurice and Michelle McCool in a naughty or nice match. It's Christmas. And she also announces that next week, Christopher Daniels will be taking on CM Punk in a pure rules match. And then, one other big announcement. Following AJ Styles' actions last week attacking Samoa Joe before his match, Stephanie has suspended AJ Styles for 2 weeks. So he'll be off suspension for the first Nitro of 2007. But the suspension starts right now, and so therefore the main event, which is supposed to be Steen Jericho versus Kurt Angle and AJ Styles for the tag titles, will now be Steen Jericho versus Kurt Angle for the tag titles. So Kurt is so AJ suspended, and Kurt now has to have a handicap match to defend the tag titles. And so, of course, AJ and Kurt are not very happy about this, and so they make their way down to the ring, and they are, of course, mad and throwing a fit. And then Stephanie calls security out. Security drags AJ Styles out of the building, and the crowd sings, "Nah, nah, goodbye," that song. Then we come back to the ring after commercial, and we have a intergender trios match between Tori Wilson, Blue Panther, and Bobby Lashley taking on Shelly Martinez, Ron Killings, and James Storm. And Bobby Lashley defeats. Bobby Lashley wins. He pins Shelly Martinez with a Dominator and blows his eardrum as well. Next, we cut backstage to a backstage interview with the United States Heavyweight Champion, Bryan Danielson, and Soka Val is asking him what his thoughts are about the triple threat coming up at Starrcade. And Danielson basically says that having Nigel in the match with Morishima makes it easier because Nigel sucks. Then for the main event, we have Kurt Angle versus Steen Jericho for the tag team championships. And Steen Jericho defeat Kurt Angle in a handicap match via disqualification. Kurt Angle gets himself disqualified on purpose, therefore retains the tag titles. Post-match, Kurt is still attacking Steen Jericho with a chair, probably. And then John Cena, the world champion, runs down and makes the save. Kurt Angle retreats to the stage. Stacy Keibler makes her way down to the ring with a microphone. And Cena cuts a promo on Kurt Angle, saying that he is going to retain his title at Starrcade for Steen Jericho and for Samoa Joe and for WCW. Alright, we're here for week 3 of SmackDown, and we're starting off with a trios match between Amazing Red, Cody Rhodes, and Jay Lethal taking on Chris Jericho and the Kings of Wrestling. Chris Jericho submits Cody Rhodes. Cut backstage to Shelton Benjamin being interviewed, and Shelton is responding to Tanahashi last week, and Shelton officially challenges Tanahashi for a match for the Cruiserweight title at Starrcade. And we're assuming Tanahashi accepts considering his words last week. Next, we have a Divas match between Rosa Mendes and Ashley defeats Rosa Mendes. Next, we have a tag match between Dolph Ziggler and Jimmy Rave taking on the Hardys, and Jeff Hardy defeats Jimmy Rave. Then we cut to a pre-taped backstage interview with Booker T, Scott Steiner, and P. Williams being interviewed by Lillian Garcia, and Steiner is very happy about his win. All three of them are very happy about Steiner's win over Rey Mysterio on Nitro. This was taped backstage pretty soon after he beat Rey. And Steiner is just talking about how it feels like the good old days back when he was on top of the world in WCW. The only thing he's missing is his #1 freak, Madeja. Madeja, of course, Scott Steiner's valet. And so Steiner is now mentioning that he should probably start looking for a new freak. Considering Lillian, but Lillian's not too happy about it, and then Steiner calls her ugly because he's a dick. Then we have the main event, Ted DiBiase Jr. versus Sting, and Sting defeats Ted DiBiase Jr. So I'm thinking about not having SmackDown anymore. There definitely won't be one next week for week 4. And I'm pretty sure there won't be any more going into 2007. It will eventually come back, and I know when exactly, but for now, it's a B show, and it's just not that fun to book. So I'm pretty sure this will be the last SmackDown for a while, unless I change my mind between now and when I start booking January 2007. But yeah. Alright, we are here for week 4 of Nitro and week 4 of December 2006, the last Nitro before 2007, and the last Nitro before Starrcade 2006. And we're starting off with Abyss defending the television championship in an open challenge, and Bobby Roode accepts the challenge, and Abyss defeats Bobby Roode to retain. Then we have an onstage interview with Kurt Angle, who is talking about John Cena and his world title match at the pay-per-view, as well as he's talking about tonight's main event, which is Kurt Angle teaming with the women's world champion Mickie James to take on Trish Stratus and the world heavyweight champion John Cena. Next we have the Divas Tag Team title match between Michelle McCool, the Divas champion, taking on Gail Kim and Sarah Stock, the Divas Tag Team champions, and Gail Kim and Sarah Stock defeat Maurice and Michelle McCool when Gail Kim strips Michelle McCool. Merry Christmas. But then, post-match, Hamada and Marcella attack Gail Kim and Sarah Stock and hold up the Women's World Tag Team titles. Gail Kim and Sarah Stock are both the Divas and the Women's World Tag Team champions. And Hamada and Marcella seem to be looking to go after the tag titles. Then we have a pre-taped promo with Katsura Shibata talking about Christian Cage and how he's been a shit champion. And I don't know, Shibata's just has a not very good opinion of Christian, how Christian has been representing the NWA World title. And Shibata believes that he could do better. Then we go backstage to Christian Cage, who is, we get his first reaction to seeing that video, that promo by Shibata. And Christian is saying how Shibata's going to have to prove that he can be NWA World Champion. But Christian doubts that Shibata can because Christian is the instant classic and Shibata is not. Next we have CM Punk taking on Christopher Daniels in a Pure Rules match. And Christopher Daniels defeats CM Punk via a roll-up. It was a quick roll-up and Daniels got the pin and then ran away, basically. Went to the ramp and hands up, celebrating on the ramp. Punk is in the ring on his knees with a can't believe this face, but like a jokingly one. Like he's got a little smile. He's like laughing at the fact that this happened. Next we have a onstage interview with Bryan Danielson, the United States Champion, and Maria is asking him if he truly believes what he said last week. Just a reminder, last week he said that it being Nigel, him having to defend the title against Nigel and Morishima is easier than just Morishima because Nigel is involved and Nigel sucks. So that's what Danielson said last week, and Danielson says, of course, that's true. But anyway, Nigel interrupts him. Danielson wants to just talk about Morishima, but Nigel then interrupts and is talking to Danielson. And then Morishima attacks Danielson, or attacks Nigel from behind. And then Morishima and Danielson are having a little stare down. before Nigel then gets up and attacks Morishima as well. And then Nigel and Danielson are having a stare down. And we go to commercial. Get back from commercial, and we have a backstage interview with the Trios champions, talking about how they will be taking on Booker T, Scott Steiner, and P. Williams at Starrcade. And then the main event, Kurt Angle and Mickie James taking on John Cena and Trish Stratus. And it is a draw as Cena and Angle both get counted out, brawling through the crowd, and they eventually brawl all the way through the crowd until we can no longer see them. So then we are left in the ring with Mickie James and Trish Stratus. And it is a stare down, face to face, whatever. And it leads to a kiss, a slap, and a double leg takedown, which leads to a brawl. So, of course, these two's past is Mickie being obsessed with Trish. And so you'd probably think Mickey's the one going for the kiss here, but no. Trish is the one that kisses Mickie. Mickie then slaps Trish, and then Trish double leg takedowns Mickie. And they brawl all on the mat, all through the ring, all outside, all in the ringside area until security and referees pull them apart. And that is how we end Nitro in Toronto. And we will see on Sunday, still in Toronto, Starrcade 2006. All right, we are here, Starrcade 2006 in the Sky Dome in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And we are starting off with the Cruiserweight title on the line. Shelton Benjamin taking on Hiroshi Tanahashi. And Shelton Benjamin defeats Hiroshi Tanahashi to win the Cruiserweight Championship for the first time. Then we cut backstage to Commissioner Stephanie. She is interviewing Toronto native Trish Stratus. Trish is cutting a promo on Mickie James, and as well as how she is aiming to become the first ever 7-time Women's World Champion. Back to the ring, we have the Trios titles on the line. Booker T, P. Williams, and Scott Steiner taking on Batista, Rey Mysterio, and RVD. And it is Scott Steiner defeating RVD after Tracy Brooks caused a distraction on Batista. And so Booker, P. Williams, and Scott Steiner, with the help of Tracy Brooks, win the Trios titles. I think Steiner found his new freak. Cut backstage to a backstage promo with the world champion John Cena talking about Kurt Angle and his match in the main event against Kurt Angle for the world title. Cena is basically reiterating what he said on Week 3 Nitro, and as well as saying that it is not Kurt Angle's time, it is John Cena's time. His time is now. Type shit. Back to the ring, we have the NWA World title on the line. Katsuyori Shibata taking on Christian Cage, and it is Christian Cage making defense number 4 of the NWA World title when he pins Katsuyori Shibata with a cradle roll up. Backstage, we have the World Women's Tag Champions, as well as the Divas Tag Champions, Gail Kim and Sarah Stock, being interviewed by Jeremy Borash, and they're talking about what happened on Nitro, their defense of the Divas titles, and then being attacked by Hamada and Marcella. And just as they're saying that, they get attacked again by Hamada and Marcella. But Gail and Sarah Stock are a little more ready for it, and the four of them, the four start brawling backstage. Now we have a hype video of Nigel McGuinness, Takeshi Morishima, and Bryan Danielson hyping up their match coming up right next for the United States Championship. And it is Bryan Danielson retaining the United States Championship after he pins Nigel McGuinness with a roll-up again. Now, Danielson was holding the tights, but still, you got to feel for Nigel. Danielson makes defense number 2 of the United States title. Next, we have a Trish Stratus, Mickie James hype video hyping up their match, which is next for the Women's World title. Trish is looking to become the first ever 7-time Women's World Champion, and Mickie James is looking to defeat who was once her idol in Trish Stratus on the biggest stage in World Championship Wrestling. Trish Stratus defeats Mickie James via the sharpshooter and wins the Women's World Championship for the 7th time. Next, we have a hype video for our main event of Kurt Angle versus John Cena for the World Heavyweight Championship. Kurt Angle defeats John Cena and wins the World Heavyweight Championship. The finish was a masked man interferes against John Cena when the referee, I think it was Earl Hebner, was knocked down. Then Red Shoes takes over as referee, and Kurt Angle hits the Olympic Slam on John Cena and wins the World Championship. Who is this masked man? Well, that is the end of Starrcade 2006. That is the end of December 2006. That is the end of 2006. I will see you for January 2007.